RT is sitting down with Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, former Navy SEAL, former professional wrestler, actor, and best-selling author. It's very nice to see you back at our New York studios.
Great to be here.
Now, Jesse, you've recently announced that you are considering participating in the presidential race in the year 2016. As an independent candidate, because of course you believe that the two-party system is crippled and corrupt. So what better timing than now? Why not do it this time around?
Well, because it would take too long. You have to build for this. See, the difficult thing, if I do it, I will be with no party. It'll be just Jesse Ventura running for president, if I do it. Well, that requires me to go out and get ballot access in all 50 states. You can't do that overnight, and it costs a lot of money. That's why I've made the statement it will require a grassroots movement of people in every state to go out and do what it takes to get me ballot access so that I can be on the ballot. And then there's a second requirement I have to be guaranteed. I've got to be in the debates. Because if you're not in the debates, you can't win. And I do not run for political office just to make a statement. When I run to win.
Now, your new book, of course, Democrats and Republicans, focuses on the parties being gang-like, right? And fighting for power just for the sake of having power. And you talk a lot about the need to eradicate corporations from politics. And my question to you, I guess, is how can this realistically be done in a country where this has been the system forever? And you yourself compare politicians to, possibly wearing NASCAR racing suits because they have so much support from corporations.
Well,
how can this be done?
First, NASCAR racing suits, like if you look at Jimmy Johnson, the great he's got patches all over that tells who his sponsors are. Well, if we require them to wear that, then we as voters will know who owns them. There's so much corruption, and it won't take long. It just recently happened. It was against the law for a corporation to contribute to a political party until the Supreme Court of our land made that what I call disastrous ruling, where they said a corporation has the same rights as an individual and that money is free speech. Well, I'm waiting for the next guy to rob the bank and use that as his defense. So that just recently happened. What we need to do is reverse that. We have to overturn the Supreme Court's ruling on those two issues, and there is a movement to do that. The only way it can be done is to amend the Constitution to specifically state corporations do not have the same rights as individuals, and money is not free speech.
Now, to me, one of the curious details about corporations in power is that we're seeing the same companies investing in both parties. And some people say it's a win-win situation for them, but in reality, others say, well, listen, actually, this is a lot more like betting on both red and black in roulette. Because, either way you lose. So what's the point? Why do they do that?
Well, you don't lose because one of them is going to be the president. And now
you lose the
them.
money that you invested in the other one.
That's nothing. Did you know what we pointed out in the book? These major corporations spend more money on lobbyists than what they pay in taxes. And that's a fact. They spend more on lobbyists than what they pay in taxes. Let me repeat that. You don't find that astounding? And why would they do that? So they don't have to pay taxes. And so, like GE 2 years ago, they made $14 billion. Not only did they not pay taxes, they got subsidies from the government. That's obscene.
What do you think about the election campaign this time around? Obviously critics are calling it a reality show. We're seeing Obama and Romney just bicker. Do you think there's ever really been a bigger disconnect between what we're seeing in the debates and in the campaign than what real Americans are actually in need of right now?
I think what you're seeing is them finally rising up to the level of professional wrestling. And I say rising up to it because in pro wrestling, in front of the cameras, we all hate each other. Behind the scenes, it's a business. And that's the same way it is for them. It's a sham. In front of the cameras and the public, they hate each other and they're on different sides of the fences. Behind the scenes, They're going out to dinner together. They're ensuring that their two-party dictatorship maintains its power. There's no difference between these two. Don't kid yourself.
Now, this September marks the one-year anniversary of the Occupy Wall Street movement, which you support the ideas of. What role do you think, if any, will this movement have played in the United States in the long run? Do you think in a decade from now people will look back and say, this really was a movement that changed the national dialogue?
Not yet. Because they've disappeared temporarily. They need to come back. Where are they? They need to continue. They need to keep the fight up. Now they've disappeared. A decade from now, no one's going to remember the Occupy Wall Street movement. Not unless it's victorious or does something. It hasn't done that yet.
How can a movement like that be victorious? What do they need to do?
By changing the country. They need to continue to stay at the parks. They need to continue to get arrested. They need to continue to be vigilant. How do you think we stopped the Vietnam War? And to me, the turning point of the Vietnam War, many people say it was the '68 Tet Offensive. That was huge, but I don't believe that was the real turning point for America. I believe the turning point of the Vietnam War was when the 4 students were killed at Kent State. Because all of a sudden, the public, the general public went back and said, wait a minute, we're even killing people in our own country now because of this war. I hate to say it, but it's going to require something of that magnitude for the Wall Street movement to truly have an impact and get to the psyche of mainstream America.
I would ask you about the way the U.S. treats elections abroad while actually really drowning in electoral process flaws here at home. Why this double standard?
There's always a double standard. There was a double standard on the Wall Street protests. While we're busy pepper spraying them and running them off with dogs, we're heralding the protests over in the Middle East. Oh, ain't this lovely? Go, go, go. We're like cheerleaders over there, while at the same time here, we're squashing down our own protesters. The height of hypocrisy. Elections the same way. We want to bring democracy all over the world, and we don't even have it here anymore. Because the 2 gangs pick your president. Mitt Romney was picked 4 years ago. You know how I know that? He wasn't picked at the convention. They knew 4 years ago. You know how I know that? Because when Obama won, right after Obama won, you started seeing these mass advertisements on TV about Mormons. Do you recall those? Where they'd show a person who was a fireman or a teacher, and they'd show all these attributes of how wonderful they were. And remember, the person would look at the camera in the end and say, and I'm a Mormon. Well, they were preparing us.
So you think, considering you say started preparing 4 years ago, he's going to be the next U.S. president?
No.
Why so much effort for somebody
Well, because he's the Republicans' main man. He's the one on the pedestal right now. John McCain was 4 years ago. George W. Bush was the 8 years prior to that. You know what I find interesting about the Republican convention? They didn't mention one word about Bush and Cheney. How do you ignore a president and vice president who a mere 3.5 years ago served for 8 years? It's like, oh boy. You know why? They don't want to identify with the true culprits who killed our economy. They're selling the people now saying we're going to fix the economy. Well, this is the same party that ruined it. After all, from 00 to 06, Bush not only was in the White House, he had a Republican House and a Republican Senate. So he had anything he wanted to do rubber stamped. The Republicans caused this economy to fail. Barack Obama inherited it.
You're obviously an advocate for eradicating the institution of the Electoral College in the United States, right? Because every vote has to count. This is a system that's not applied anywhere else in the world.
It's not applied to any other election in the United States.
When you
run for governor, the most vote.
How can this be done?
Easy.
If we're seeing rotating chairs between Democrats, Republicans, they're obviously not interested in changing that system.
The people have to demand it. The people have to demand it.
Well, there are a lot of things that people demand that they don't.
Well, they have to be persistent and truly demand it. They have to threaten to vote them out of office. You got to threaten. If you don't change the Electoral College, you won't be sitting there next year. That's the only way they respond. It's the threat that they could lose their job.
You think the American people could really get worked up enough about the Electoral College when they have all these other things going on they need to deal with?
Difficult, but you know, the Electoral College was good when they put it in. You know why? You had to travel by horseback to Washington. That's why it was there. It's the only election like that in this country. I've been a mayor. He who gets the most votes wins. Governor, Congress, Senate.
Jesse, the Syrian crisis. The conflict has been gripping really the world for over a year and a half now. What kind of role, if any, should the United States be playing in this whole conflict? And if you were president, what would you do?
None. It's their business.
What about the whole idea of the United States trying to help out the Syrian people who have the right to stand up against their government?
That's up to the Syrian people.
So as U.S. president, you would...
I'd stay out of all of it. It's not my business. And if they don't like us, they'd get no foreign aid. I'd ignore them if they don't like me. I don't hang out with people that don't like me. Who made us the world's policemen? In fact, I'd take it a step farther. If I were president, every foreign military base the United States has would be closed, and I'd bring our men and women home. We have the technology today with our military. We can destroy anyone in the world at any moment. What do we need bases and occupy? I mean, we got multiple bases in Japan, Korea, and Germany. Haven't those wars been over for 60 years? Why are we there?
Do you think the same rules apply to no matter what kind of geopolitical interests the United States has with a country in crisis? Does it apply to every country? Do not get involved in their business? Or
no, I would get involved with another country's affairs only if that country specifically asked. Please come and help us.
I wanted to ask you about the whole Julian Assange ordeal. Do you think it's been way overblown by the United States and the West and the whole story of his attempts of political asylum to Ecuador? What's your take on this whole case?
My take is that I want to know what they know. And I have every right to know what my government does. You want to know why? Whose money do they use? Mine. Taxes. And as a taxpayer, I have every right to know what they're spending it on. Every right.
Do you think you'll find out?
Oh, absolutely not. Unless I become president.
All right, Jesse Ventura, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's always a pleasure.